Testing 1, 2, 3. 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 If someone give me a video and audio check when I come on, good to go. All right. Loud and clear. All right. Awesome. Okay. All right. Today, we are going to cover LIMA, which stands for least intrusive and minimally aversive. You should have notes in your classroom. I'm also gonna, since this is a pretty important subject, there will be a link to this subject and all the notes in the knowledge base too. So I also have my notes in the knowledge base under LIMA, and there will always be a shortcut to get to this page by even typing LIMA, LIMA .dog in a browser, and it will always bring a shortcut directly to this page. So it's lima.dog. I do have, let's see, some notes up over here. And some of what our objectives today are going to be we want to learn what cynopraxis is, as well as LIMA, because it is important to understand what cynopraxis is. We also need to learn what LIMA is not. That's an important part of this lecture too, because LIMA is definitely misunderstood and misrepresented on a pretty large scale in the industry. So we need to know where to go to get the correct information. And I love to have sources for you guys. All right. Let's see, making sure. Okay, you guys are going on. Yeah, if your screen have an issue with your screen, try refreshing. Try refreshing the screen. And I'm going to put the link too for the classroom as well over here, in case sometimes we have the link too for the, oh boy, sometimes we simply have the wrong link. I'll put this here. All right, I put a link in the chat box too. Hopefully that'll work right there. All right. Next thing that we will be learning is, where was I? Okay, understand how adhering to the true meaning of LIMA will make you a more successful dog trainer, be better for the industry. It will therefore help reverse or prevent tool bans, which are very important, make better qualified professionals, will help there to be more fair marketing in the industry, and also how it will be better for the general public, create less abuse, and better protect the consumers out there. Okay, great. Looks like we're all back on the video. All right. Now, since this is foundation style dog training, we do like to learn things in a certain order. So I teach things so you can learn it in a certain order, which builds a foundation to make it easier to understand the next layer. So our previous lesson was on ethics and the dog training industry. So over here, if we look at our foundation, ethics is way down at the bottom. Now, LIMA is considered part of the ethics module, But before we did this unit, right, we did ethics in the dog training business. So this is going to be important because what we need, some of the subjects we're going to talk about are going to have to deal with honesty and competence, transparency. So we need these things, right? We need these things in order to be LIMA, right? If we don't adhere to some basic business ethics in the dog training industry, LIMA is going to fall apart because the term LIMA is thrown around, scrambled up. It is designed to be a criteria to show competency. That's one of the reasons behind LIMA. Unfortunately, you will also see that it is being manipulated to be adjusted to be used for those that are not competent. And that's not what it's about, right? The definition of LIMA is not to be changed to adjust for trainers who are not competent. Let's go down here. All right. What is LIMA in dog training? All right. So LIMA stands for least intrusive, minimally aversive. The term was coined by Steven Lindsay and is described in volume 2 and volume 3 of Applied Dog Behavior and Training. So what I did is, because this is not often done, people refer to LIMA, but people rarely, or references rarely go and show his words. This is twisted a lot. I put every mention of LIMA into the notes over here that you will see in his 2 volumes. Also, what I did is on this page is I have links to those volumes. Steven Lindsay's volumes. Steven Lindsay's volumes are, in my opinion, by far the greatest contribution to the dog training industry to date. They're super thorough, well referenced. They are not biased at all. It is extremely ethical volumes. And the worst part about the volumes is they're expensive, right? They are expensive. So it's not easy for everyone to purchase these volumes. But if you do want to get his volumes, please be ethical and buy his volumes. All right, don't pirate them from somewhere, because Steven Lindsay is around, and that was a lot of effort that he put in. So we should be grateful. But what I'm going to do is, about this subject, is I am going to show you the pieces from his volumes so we can go through what it is. Then what we need to do is go through what LIMA is not. Okay. Now, Peter Lindsay, he considers himself a cynopraxic trainer. And his description of cynopraxic training proceeds on the assumption that dogs and people possess a shared capacity to establish relations based on fair exchange. Such training promotes cognitive, emotional, and behavioral changes, conducive social competence, cooperation, and play. Cynopraxic training objectives are governed by 2 essential social and life experience criteria. 1, enhance the human-dog relationship, and 2, improve the dog's quality of life. Now, to repeat that in a more like layman's terms, basically what he's saying is that when you're training in a cynopraxic way, that you not only have your own interest in mind, right? We want to be able to enjoy our dog, is we also have the dog's best interest in mind. is we want to consider everything that also makes the dog happy. And if we cater our training, our methods of training to this idea that it should mutually benefit us both and should work to improve our relationship with the dog, we're going to be on the right track with that base. What I also did over here is, because I like to scour every information, all the information that I can about something, and there's not enough people talking about cynopraxis. I did put in my notes over here. I put some extra stuff. I really liked, I found an old blog post and I put a link over here. And this is Robert Vaughn and German Shepherd Adventures. I put a link to an old blog post, and I love seeing how other trainers that are also interpreting the words. And sometimes I just can't say things, better. So it's good to use someone else's words. And this trainer over here, I love how he described it too. And he said the word itself is of Greek origin, cyno meaning dog and praxis meaning to do. What's interesting about the word praxis is the root meaning. It refers to using specific theoretical knowledge to accomplish a goal. Praxis does not have a preference how that goal is accomplished, but instead referring to the attitude of the practitioner of said method. Simply put, I quote myself, I don't care what type of training methods you use with your dog, as long as it fulfills the dog's need for a relationship with you. And that's a good article. I'm not going to read the whole article, but this is a great blog post. It's old, it looks like. Looks like it was posted in 2012 or something. So remember, we're talking about low level, I would call it like lower base level principles that we want to follow before we start training, even before we start learning to train, right? It's right now, you got to think it's not about, don't worry so much about the exact mechanics of how you're going to train, what tools you're going to use, what methods. We want a base of like what it's all about, right? So for training cynopraxis, where we're truly improving that relationship. And as professional dog trainers, no matter what phone call you get, you will see this is a common denominator, right? Someone's going to call you about an aggression issue. They're going to call you about their dogs just pulling on the leash. They're having a housebreaking issue. But really the common denominator of all these clients is ultimately they want to enjoy their dog more and they want to see their dog happy. So that's why if we think about it this way, of how important it is to start from day one with a cynopraxic mind and way of wanting to do things, we are going to really hit the common denominator of everyone right out the box. All right. Now, here I put a bunch of notes. So you want to understand the words of Steven Lindsay himself first before you go look at interpretations of what LIMA is. Now, in my notes here, what I did is I took some notes from his words, and my own words here are written in blue. Anything we see written in blue is just my own words and little takeaways here. I put some things in red that I find are most important. And I don't know if I'm going to read. This is here, so you guys could read a lot of this on your own, but I'm going to pull out some of the most important parts about LIMA. So he talks about LIMA in different parts of his volumes. And this first one that I'm going to read to you right here is he writes, correction procedures should not be used lightly or haphazardly. The rule of thumb is to select the least aversive and intrusive procedure that is reasonably expected to succeed. According to the least intrusive and minimally aversive model, right? So he's LIMA. So he's using LIMA. He always refers to LIMA as least intrusive and minimally aversive. Aversives are ranked in terms of their relative severity and intrusiveness. requiring that the trainer apply a less aversive technique before advancing to a more aversive one. Adhering to this model and selection process ensures that the least necessary and sufficient aversive procedure is used to promote the intended behavioral objective. In addition to minimizing the potential for producing pain and discomfort, correction procedures should be governed by a principle of minimum intrusiveness. Training procedures should intrude minimally on the human-dog bond and avoid adversely affecting the dog's quality of life. Overly constrictive restraint and confinement techniques should be avoided, and I highlighted this, should be avoided in favor of techniques that most rapidly and humanely achieve training objectives without causing undue distress or discomfort to the dog. All right, so I'm going to interpret this, put this in layman's terms for you a bit. His words are there. His words are there for you to interpret as you feel as well. But what I get from this, all right, is that we want to use, when necessary, if we can accomplish something using the least amount of aversiveness as possible. So aversives in dog training is generally something that a dog would rather avoid, right? So it could be a feeling, it could be a noise. It is something that the animal would want to avoid. So our leash corrections, e-collar stuff, anything like that, that's aversive. So the dog wants to avoid it. Now, intrusiveness, remember, that's half of the model, is discussing that we want to be the least amount aversive as possible to accomplish a goal. The other part, LIMA is kind of divided into two things, and it's about not being aversive, the least amount of aversive as possible, and also the least amount of intrusiveness. Now, you will find different definitions of what intrusiveness is, and that becomes part of the problem when other organizations are interpreting LIMA. But in Steven Lindsay's own words, he is generally speaking about the intrusiveness of the human-dog relationship, all right? When we are doing things that prevents us from being together and prevents us from enjoying each other. We're being intrusive to that relationship, all right? So think about things. So this is going to cover, right? So aversives will be like using correction, using punishment. The intrusiveness is when we're doing techniques that remove the animal away from us, ignoring the animal for long periods of time. Putting the dog in the other room because we can't control the behavior right now, right? So we're going to get more into this, but he wants us in the training process, be least aversive as possible. Try not to be as intrusive on the relationship as professionals, right? We're trying to make this a good experience for the owner. Now here, from volume 2, he says, in addition to avoiding recommendations that may potentially harm the relationship between family and dog, training recommendations should not present risks of injury to the owner or dog. Although well-timed corrections can be highly effective and expedient, recommendations involving the hitting and hanging of aggressive dogs, such as in Keeler's book, all right, it's the one I showed you guys in one of the other streams, should be avoided. Not only are such methods of questionable efficacy, they may actually significantly worsen the situation if improperly performed and perhaps cause the owner to be bitten or causing physical injuries to the dog. All right. So by focusing on tools, it takes away from the focus of violent and dangerous techniques that do not require the use of a tool, was what my takeaway is on this. All right. So when we're talking about Lindsey, all right, we're talking about Lindsey. You will notice when we read these, there's not any mention about tools, dog training tools, being LIMA or not LIMA. It's mostly going to be about, in general, things we do that harm the relationship between the family and dog, and things that can cause physical injury. Does not matter what tool. You don't need a tool to cause physical injury, right? It could be a hand, it could be any kind of collar, any kind of leash. And so injuring the dog, causing undue stress from the dog, harming our relationships. All right. So that's a takeaway from this section over here. So not only know what he is saying, understand what he is not saying. From another reference inside of his volumes, he says, in conclusion, both excessively intrusive and aversive techniques may adversely affect owner compliance or violate human standards of practice. Cynopraxic trainers should make an effort to conform their training interventions to the LIMA principle by employing procedures that represent the least necessary intrusion upon the human-dog bond, and cause the dog a minimal amount of discomfort as necessary to achieve behavioral objectives. Again, driving this home, he's talking equally. He's given equal weight to be LIMA, that we want to plans, all right? He's not telling you what plan to use, but we're always searching for a plan that not only causes the minimal amount of discomfort to the dog, but also the minimum amount of intrusion between the human and dog bond, all right? Read his words, understand his words, all right? We want to understand LIMA. I promise you, this, by understanding his words, it is going to set a base which makes your plans humane and successful. Now, further training recommendations should do no harm to the human-dog relationship, to the dog, or to the owner in the process of implementing them. All right. So remember, not only the dog, it's also the owner here. You got to protect the owner. We don't want to harm the owner. We don't want to give the owner a traumatic experience training an animal. Rather than dictating a one-sided program that cannot be realistically implemented by the family, the cynopraxic counselor should work with the family in a spirit of teamwork to find a common solution. Important, all right? That is super important sentence over here, all right? Because we will often hear about trainers given plans that are unrealistic, that are based mostly off of self-righteousness, meaning this is the plan. If you do this plan, we can avoid all punishment, or go too far in one direction, where it becomes almost realistically impossible for the owners to be able to do. Now, self-righteousness is not the same as being humane. Self-righteousness is not the same as being competent or effective, all right? So remember, we want to not be self-righteous when we train a dog. And that's basically what he's saying over here, all right? So if we have an aggressive dog that the owners want to spend more time with, want to take on walks, but they have to leave this dog home all the time because they're making no progress with the training plan, because their plan, in order for them to implement it, means that they have to do conditions that are almost impossible for them to create, almost impossible for them to find time for, and would take absurd amounts of time to maybe get some sort of result, because it's not necessarily because it's not the best plan to get the owners what they need. This would be an example of a one-sided program that cannot be implemented by the family. That's not why we're being hired, right? We're being hired to improve that relationship, to improve the quality of life between dog and family. Toward achieving this aim, the counselor should listen to the family's needs and be creative. Just as it is certainly true of dogs, people or individuals possess unique strengths and weaknesses that need to be recognized and integrated into the training plan. Good cynopraxic counselors know how to work well with both people and dogs. Next, from Volume 3. Aversive procedures should only be used to achieve cynopraxic objectives, not otherwise attainable by non-aversive means alone. Highlighted, all right? So further, all training procedures that produce discomfort, startle, this is my own words in blue here. I put things like verbal interrupters. This is when people go like, or make different sounds or stuff like that. Or loss, negative punishment, right? This is removing something to discourage. This including isolation, cold shoulder in dogs. In blue is my words. Should be applied in adherence to the LIMA principle and the dead dog rule. All right, so the dead dog rule is basically when you're training, and we'll get into that. We're actually going to talk more about that. And especially when we get into applied behavior analysis too, is plans, if your plan seems to mostly stop behaviors and teach dogs things that even a dead dog could do. So someone wants their dog to stop jumping on people. And their plan is just to punish. So the dog, just punish so the dog is not jumping, just punishing the jumping itself. But not making a plan for an alternative behavior of what the dog should do. You know, the dog should come and sit nicely in front of someone, something active. If it is something that a dead dog could do, which is basically do nothing, that's what he means by the dead dog rule. We want to give the dogs alternative behaviors when we make the plan. So being LIMA, we want to avoid just punishing, and we do want to seek what are appropriate alternative behaviors for the dog to do. Now, I have this over here because this is an important concept. I have highlighted aversive procedures should only be used to achieve objectives not otherwise attainable by non-aversive means alone. So let's give an example. If we're doing, if there's something that you're training the dog to do that does not require aversives at all, and you can get something that solves your problem. Good example is just tricks, right? Like little parlor tricks and silly tricks that people train their dog to do, to jump on things, jump over things, stand on their hind legs, things like that. Most of these things can be accomplished without using punishment at all. And it's especially if you're being cynopraxic, like you're only doing it if it's going to enhance the dog's happiness and your happiness, not just to like show off to someone, right? So he does not believe when you're being LIMA, you should not be using aversive, things that make a dog uncomfortable, when it's just simply not necessary to do it. And also there's a lot of the teaching process that you'll see that we can do without aversives, that should be done without aversives in order to be LIMA, which you will see will give us better results regardless. So I'm stressing a lot. I mean, this is all of his mentions of LIMA in here, so I'm not hiding it. There could be some other stuff that I don't see in his volumes, but this is every reference to LIMA that I could find in his books. But you will see that it's very equal about not making the dog uncomfortable and not hurting that relationship by keeping the dog away from you. But he does want you to use the least amount of aversives as possible. Now, with this is sort of cherry picked, you'll see. In a lot of organizations, it seems to just focus on this part to it, that you should not use aversives. Use aversives as little as possible. Anytime that you can accomplish something without using aversives, to do it. But it leaves out the part, a lot of the part about the intrusiveness, or replaces the definition of intrusiveness with someone else's definition of intrusiveness. So we're not considering about, if we do it this way, it's without the aversive helping us, it's going to take so long, and it's going to sometimes be unrealistic, and we end up not accomplishing what we need to in the client in the long run. All right. So, but this is where it is. It is over here. You will see reference to this in different position statements and stuff like this in the dog industry. Now, next, in addition to avoiding training procedures that are needlessly aversive, cynopraxic trainers avoid procedures that intrude excessively upon a dog's freedom incentive. Training efforts that inappropriately restrict a dog's ability to initiate goal-directed behavior not only adversely impact the dog's quality of life, but often do so without contributing any real therapeutic benefit. For example, inappropriate restraint or isolation, pointless deprivation procedures, intrusive rules of interaction, and tedious extinction and training rituals may be of little positive benefit with respect to training goals, but impose time-consuming hardships on the owner, impede the bonding process, and impair the dog's ability to adjust, perhaps making the problem worse. Although highly intrusive procedures do not generate physical pain, they can produce significant emotional pain and distress while augmenting interactive conflict. All right, so what he's basically talking about here, right, is the dangers of excessive negative punishment. That doesn't involve aversives. It's removing the dog from things that make the dog happy, all right? And removing the dog from situations instead of addressing the situations in a timely manner, again, is emphasized. So when we hear LIMA, when we hear any organization talk about LIMA, and they're going to be talking about don't use aversives, or don't use aversives are the absolutely last resort, and you're going to see crazy things in these position statements where a lot of the largest organizations tell trainers, do not use punishment unless you consult with other professional trainers and you have like a big powwow about it. Where Steven Lindsay, the heart of what he's talking about LIMA has nothing to do with that. All right. He wants you to understand the heart of the matter, and that this is equal. All right. Punishment is not necessarily a less humane technique than intrusiveness or negative punishment. All right. Those are separate concepts. Anything could be abused or misused or be the wrong plan. All right. And we could dive into all the techniques, right? This is the competency part of it. But they're equal. It is not about this one's more humane and this one's less humane. As a cynopraxic trainer who is trained in LIMA, is trained to train the LIMA using that as a competency criteria, is you need to be well versed in different techniques so you can choose for the dog and human's own good of their relationship what is the best plan to do. So you're going to have plan A, plan B, sometimes plan C, plan D. All right. And that's what he's talking about over here. Despite obvious limitations and risks, aversive procedures are a necessary aspect of dog training and behavior problem solving that cannot be neglected or substituted for. For instance, by drugs, when competent inhibitory control over highly motivated behavior is being established. All right. Now, he is saying here, because Steven Lindsay is in the trenches. He is a real dog trainer. He was a real dog trainer, and it's based off of experience and extensive study and being objective and not having some biased agenda. He's saying in his literature over here that aversive procedures are a necessary aspect of dog training. Right? It serves a different purpose. All right? Just like when we're driving a car, we have a gas pedal and we have a brake pedal. They serve two different purposes. One is not better than the other. If we need to move forward, there's no substitution for the gas pedal. All right? If we need to stop, there's no substitution for the brake pedal. So this is what he's saying here. All right, let's go on. The LIMA principle addresses the excesses and abuses. All right. So that the only place we hear about abuses is here, where he's talking, and not about tools. It's about using things in excess. All right. And abuses to misuse something, to use incorrectly, that might arise when aversive or intrusive, again, equal weight. Aversive, meaning things that cause discomfort, or intrusive dog training procedures are implemented. As such, it applies to both positive and negative punishment. So positive punishment, for those of you new, is when we're adding something to discourage a behavior. Negative punishment is when we're removing something the dog likes or needs or desires to discourage a behavior. All right, so it doesn't necessarily physically cause them discomfort, but it can psychologically sure cause them discomfort. And covers procedures that generate states of emotional pain and deprivation, long-term cold shouldering, crate confinement, isolation, and various restraint techniques. Keeping a dog chained out in the yard, where if you understand how to use aversives, you may be able to have that dog off leash responsibly and safely. Where I lost my spot here. All right. The LIMA principle entails that trainers use the least intrusive, again, over and over again, least intrusive and minimally aversive technique likely to succeed in achieving a training objective with minimal risk of producing adverse side effects. Minimal risk of producing adverse side effects. Again, these are things as trainers we're looking to do. When we choose our plan, we do not want a side effect. Essentially, I put this in red. These are his words. The LIMA principle is a competency criterion. LIMA measures your ability to use LIMA effectively is a measure of your competence. Since only competent trainers possession the necessary know-how, can make the required assessments, and have the skills needed to ensure that the least intrusive and aversive procedure is in fact used. To speak of the effectiveness, to speak of the effective and humane use of dog training procedures in the absence of competency criterion borders on the ridiculous. Accordingly, incompetent uses of attractive and aversive motivational stimuli. All right. So basically treat training, using positive training, or using aversives, things that are uncomfortable. You could be incompetent with both of these. To modify dog behavior are liable to produce harmful effects that violate the dog's interests and breach the trust of responsible dog owners seeking help. Cynopraxic trainers acknowledge and respect the dog's preference for pleasure by advocating the use of procedures that utilize reward and minimize punishment. However, to train a dog to a reasonable degree of reliability, the use of both attractive and aversive motivational incentives is, I gotta stress this, is an inescapable fact of life. However, to train a dog to a reasonable degree of reliability, the use of both attractive and aversive motivational incentives is an inescapable fact of life. All right. Okay. If you want to drive a car with a degree of reliability, you need to know to use the gas and the brake. To train a dog, you need to use both attractive and aversive. You got to show the dog why it's good to do the behavior that you're trying to encourage and why it's bad to do the behavior that you're trying to discourage. Especially as a professional dog trainer, right? Where, what are people calling us for? They're calling us for serious issues. They're not calling us to teach their dog to play frisbee in the backyard with their border collie. They have serious issues. They have large dogs with teeth that can hurt people, that are lunging, that they can't bring people in their home. They have problems that are going to send the dog back to a shelter or get euthanized. These are serious things that require competent trainers. Nowhere does Lindsey mention prong collars or e-collars in his statements about LIMA. Nowhere does he actually, he doesn't mention anything about tools. All right. But he does mention them in his volumes. All right. He does mention them in his volumes. So when you see statements about LIMA, and that if you're LIMA, you should not use e-collars or prong collars, that it is twisting what LIMA means. It is trying to take what LIMA means and alter it, to adjust it to trainers or organizations that are incompetent, that don't have the means to train those members to be competent. What we have here is, in his volumes, he talks about e-collars, he talks about prong collars. Know what he says about e-collars? A device for delivering a remote punishment that has considerable usefulness is the remote activated electronic collar. Remote electronic stimulation provides a means for delivering a well-timed and measurable, these good ones are adjustable, 127 levels, the ones that I use. In many ways, this is what he says, in many ways it represents an ideal positive punisher, having many potential applications in dog training. All right. Now, what he also says is what may not be justifiable is their current widespread use by dog owners with little behavioral background or experience, incompetent trainers. There is a considerable risk for abuse when such collars are placed into naive and inexperienced hands. LIMA is about competence. If a trainer or organization is talking about LIMA and their members have no training or experience using an e-collar, they are not competent. They shouldn't be using it. All right. They're not competent trainers. All right. You have well-respected, it's probably the only, it's the only volumes that I know of that are suitable and objective enough to be used at the university level is his volumes. All right. And here, there is no unbiased scientific literature that supports that tools are the same thing as abuse. And something like an e-collar is adjustable. It's actually, if we're comparing it to other things like gentle leaders, all right, like gentle leaders or no pull harnesses or things like that, it's actually less physical force. There's less manipulation. There's less risk for physical injury if someone knows how to use it, if they're competent. All right. And you can adjust, they're more adjustable. All right. Just because these things can be cranked up high in e-collar doesn't mean a competent trainer has to crank it up any more than what they need to get the result from it, with usually a split second. A lot of things get done with a split second of stimulation at the exact level to get the result from the animal. And if it's done the right way, the dog's not confused. The dog understands what it is. All right. So an e-collar, there's nothing about it in itself that is abusive. It's definitely LIMA. All right. If we want to be least aversive as possible, when it comes to, for a lot of things that we're going to do in dog training, it is going to scare the dog. It's going to confuse, it's going to stress the dog out less than a lot of other techniques. It's going to allow the dog to bond even quicker, be with the owners quicker in a lot of cases if it's used correctly. I'll go a little off track here. Let's give a little example, all right, about LIMA and decisions that someone has to make. Suppose someone has a client and they rent property and they have this big piece of property that the family goes out a lot on, spend a lot of their time on, but for whatever reason, zoning laws, landlord or whatever, they're not allowed to put a fence up. And there's this busy road out there. All right. Now, what is most LIMA to do with this dog? And it's not a border collie. Say it's a beagle. It's something that likes to go and put its nose to the ground and find things. Nothing that necessarily was selectively bred or chosen to just stick around and look at you and not necessarily go near the road. There's woods across the street and there's bunnies across the street. What's the LIMA thing to do? Leave the dog chained up? Try to only teach the dog why it's good to stay with us and just use treats and leave toys and bones in the yard and hope there's nothing more motivational across the street like a bunny? Or do we become competent and learn how to use and decide maybe an invisible fence system will work in this situation? And I'm competent enough to understand how to teach invisible fence system with the least amount of aversives as possible. I could teach the dog the whole boundary without doing any type of aversive. All right. I could teach the dog everything about it. I could tape up the invisible fence collar and I could let it know when the sound is, pull it towards the middle of the yard, give it all. And then when I know the dog understands it, yes, I could give it one well-timed punishment when it goes over the line. That will mostly be the end of the training at that point, right? Where the dog can now be in the yard with the family and have all this fun and have a better bond, happier dog, happier people. Or let's keep the dog barking on the chain or inside the house or in a crate, okay? Now, he talks about prong collars. I'm not going to, you guys could read this, but It's a matter of fact, all right? He talks very matter of fact about it, that it's a good. There's nothing about it if someone understands the prong collar, all right? If you don't understand the prong collar, we're going to say, oh, this is ugly. All right, this is ugly. It must be abusive. And yes, people that don't know how to use it, that are not competent, are going to take it and jerk it and make a dog cry. But not someone who's competent. It's designed for a purpose, all right? It's actually pretty safe on the dog's neck, and they're blunt, and it makes things safer for an animal, all right? All training collars, all right? If we're talking about incompetence, here's the precision collar, all right? If you're incompetent, you're going to make all kinds of judgments about this, all right? If you're competent, you will say, I seen Mitch put a balloon in here and pull on this. It wouldn't even pop the balloon. All right. So until you know physically how it's supposed to be used, all right, everything's designed a certain way. All right. Cones doesn't get caught in the hair. All right. More surface area. Makes a good choice for an elderly person that has trouble putting a collar on, right? Everything has its own purpose, right? I may find a reason to use the gentle leader. I may find a reason to use a star mark collar. I may use, there's an e-collar. There's all these different tools. There's ones that aren't invented yet, all right? It's based off of competence, all right? A cynopraxic trainer, someone who's being LIMA, you don't have to ban any tools because they're going into it. If they're not going into it, we're trying to improve the relationship and choosing the least aversive anyway to accomplish their goals. They're not being LIMA anyway. They're not competent. They shouldn't be a dog trainer. All right? Don't adjust LIMA for the incompetent. LIMA is the measure of incompetence. So, this brings us, all right? So, this brings us, let me make sure you guys are all good. Look in the chat box here. Okay, you guys are good. We have all these organizations. We'll jump ahead here. Go around all the major organizations, American Pet Dog Trainers Association, International Association of Animal, of International Association of Animal Behavior Consultants. I don't know if Pet Professional Guild. Anyway, these are pretty big organizations, especially the first two over here. They have position statements about LIMA. Let's go over here. Let's go to the American Pet Dog Trainers Association. And I'm going to talk about how this is horrible for the industry. Huge disservice to the members. Huge disservice to the members. All right, so they have their statement, and they talk about LIMA. If you read through this, it is not going to be Steven Lindsay's words. All right, it's not going to be Steve. I'm not going to read it to you. Matter of fact, let's go over here. LIMA, American Pet Dog Trainers. After they explain their warped version of what it is, they ask you questions. Am I LIMA compliant? 4 questions to determine whether you are compliant with LIMA principles. Ready? Do you use any of the following tools, techniques, while training any behavior or during behavior modification? Choke collar. So this includes, I have the guiding eyes for the blind people that use choke collars around here. Prong collars. Shock collar, meaning the e-collar. Bonker. Shaker cans, a can with pennies. Citronella spray. Water spray. Leash pop, leash correction. Yelling or any other technique designed to cause fear, pain, or startle in the dog prior to exhausting less aversive or invasive techniques. All right. Yes, I do. You are not LIMA compliant. LIMA compliant, blah, 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 blah. All right. When training or conducting behavior modification, Is the dog continually monitored for distress signals? Wait, let's go this one. If you are, if you are working with a dog and they are not showing progress within the normally expected time frame, and you have no other ideas, or you are not able to keep the stress at a minimal, do you continue to work with the dog anyway? So these are other things. But what I wanted to point out over here is they're really kind of attacking collars over here, attacking collars, where there is nothing in LIMA that says that you need to exhaust other techniques without using a training tool. You don't have to exhaust intrusiveness techniques or training that just uses positive. There's nothing in LIMA as stated in there. There's nothing. There's nothing in there. And there's nothing in Steven Lindsay's guidelines that say that any tool is by itself a bad thing or overly aversive or should be used or should not be used before doing some, before using something else. Only when you are using aversives that you use the least amount of aversives as possible. And if you are doing a technique, of course, all right, if you can accomplish it without the aversive, of course do it. But it's not, he also talks about how it is ridiculous. It is basically ridiculous to assume that you can train a dog without using aversives. Now, we can go to other places. This is the international, over here, this one, the International Association of Animal Behavior Consultants. And again, LIMA is totally, let's see, they talk about LIMA and they talk about the use of, this is all added on the same page. The use of shock in training and behavior is not considered a best practice by the IAABC or the Joint Standards of Practice and is strongly discouraged. Our goal is eliminate the use of shock devices, blah, blah, blah. Members will work to eliminate the use of shock implementary from their practice. Before applying shock or using shock devices, members should consult with one of their certified consultants or board certified behaviors to review the case and ensure that all possible less intrusive, remember, intrusive is preventing, is about, according to Steven Lindsay, is about the bond, is impeding upon the bond between the owner and the dog. That aversive options have been worked. Consultants ought to assess current skills of the behavior, blah, blah, blah. Consultants may take place in person, via recorded video, or via live virtual visit. This applies to every individual case. So what they're saying, and also somewhere you can find on the APDT site too, is, I'm sorry, I should have been sharing this page over here, is what they're basically saying, and even on the American Pet Dog Trainers, is they're advising trainers, if you're a member of their organization, that if you are going to use punishment in training, especially over there, they talk about the e-collars, that you need to consult with them first in order to be a member of the organization, or else you're not being humane. And let me see, I want to find over here where it talks about the American Pet Dog Trainers Association. Positive punishment. Well, what this comes down to, all right, not as organized as I would like to be here. Oh, here we go. American Pet Dog Trainers. When making training and behavior modification decisions, says, for these reasons, we strongly support the humane and thoughtful application of LIMA protocols, and we applaud those individuals and organizations working with animals and humans with LIMA guidelines. Now, I'm not going to go through this, but this is what's happening. When you read these organizations' definitions of LIMA, is what happened is they associate it with this. Susan Friedman's humane hierarchy. Susan Friedman's humane hierarchy. I put this here as how did it hijack it. You can go through all of those sites and you're going to see Susan Friedman's humane hierarchy on the same pages as LIMA, and the terms and definitions and guidelines of her outlined humane hierarchy, replacing the guidelines for which you see in Steven Lindsay's book. And this is dishonest. That's why ethics is, we learned ethics before this. It is misrepresenting what LIMA is. It is misrepresenting what 3 volumes of incredible information are given us, and then how LIMA represents the competency of trainers who understand how to use different techniques and tools to form a certain goal. And Susan Friedman's humane hierarchy, which is posted on a lot of these sites, all right, she's like a psychology professor that also is involved with animal training now. It is based off of, which in itself is not, like, I want to be careful not to trash this, because in it, it's not, I believe the heart of it, most people have good intentions, right? So I'm not going to trash Susan Friedman here. You can see something like this. This is basically by taking common things you see in applied behavior analysis, mostly used with like kids and disabled kids, and transferring it over to dog training, which on a broad sense, I agree with that general concept. What I disagree with is how it does not put things on the way it represents things, as some things are just worse than others, as compared to that there's a right order to do things. Like you will see here, according to the guidelines, there's some good stuff here, like, which is very similar to what we teach here, right? You need guidelines, right? We need to make sure before we address a problem that we understand the animal ethology. So we're teaching that we make sure it's not health related. We understand what it is. Right? We want to make sure we have a good attitude about it. If we understand what it is and we know the dog, we understand why the dog is having an issue, we're going to treat the dog better. And of course, if we could just manage the issue, or management becomes part of the plan, we're addressing all of these things the right way. And then even when we train a dog, because it actually works for cynopraxic training, right? If we're teaching something like a dog to come when called, of course, it makes sense, and it is better to teach the dog why it's good to come, know what those words are, why it's good to come, exactly what it means. And then we're going to teach the dog patiently when punishment comes with the least aversive as possible, the least amount as possible, to teach the dog, where at the end of the training session, if you're training correctly, you should be able to say, you know what, me and the dog still enjoyed that lesson. It was a bonding experience. You can do it if you're competent, and then get more aversive as the deed applies, right? We're going hiking with that dog, with that beagle, and it likes to chase after rabbits. You don't want to lose your beagle. We're still going to start here, but this is part of a full education. So, and it doesn't even necessarily mean in all situations things have to go completely in this order. But in general, right? In general, it's not a bad plan for a lot of cases to start with positive reinforcement and then work our way to things that include aversives. But if the more the dog understands first, and you have the dog's best interest in mind, you want it to be an enjoyable process for everybody, it's nothing it's nothing that anyone has to be like self-righteous about and say, oh, this is bad. This is a bad thing to do. But this is where we have trouble. This is what's happening with this model and these organizations. It actually has this good stuff here, which in a lot of cases is, I would agree with, all right? Manage, reward, if possible, reward the good behaviors, ignore the bad behaviors, use extinction, use negative punishment. Negative reinforcement actually follows, if we're talking about basic obedience commands, in order that I would normally do. But look what we have over here where it says positive punishment. It shows like a big, like a stop sign and like a crumbled up, it looks like a busted, oh, it's a busted bank. All right. It's a piggy bank with like coins all over the floor, and just like, it makes positive punishment to be like this horrible thing to avoid at all costs. And a lot of these organizations, if you're following their code of conduct, before you use positive punishment, you're expected to consult with other trainers about other ways to do it. And it's supposed to be a last resort to do it. Now, this is detached from reality, and it makes it, they're creating an environment where their members have to break their code of conduct and be unethical in their code of conduct if they want to be successful. As a trainer, we're not talking about kids, all right, about disabled kids in a classroom, all right, where we're teaching to use the potty and stuff like that. We're talking about dogs that are violently lunging at people or off leash running around in the woods and stuff like that. And we're talking about people that are calling that have serious problems that need a competent trainer. And the competent trainer, yes, is there to make things as humane as possible. And yes, should be using all these rewards and all those good things. Yes, I'm a huge advocate of this. However, how many calls is a dog trainer going to get where they can accomplish what they need to accomplish for that owner without using positive punishment? All right. This is adding something to discourage a behavior. So putting a no pull harness on a dog to help someone is part of the process. Even during the training process, so they could take this newly adopted dog that's a little too strong for them, is positive punishment. Gentle leader is positive punishment. Except sometimes things get a waiver because they have a nice title, or they don't look ugly, or they don't look scary. They kind of have loopholes for these things. All right. But not if it has prongs. If it looks ugly, then it goes in a different class. It gets cherry picked as far as what has to conform to this and what really doesn't. Someone just buys a dog from the shelter, a big adult dog. They live in a studio apartment. They take medications that are toxic to the dog. This dog is big. It could jump on the countertops and stuff like that. All right. A trainer cannot go in there and show how to apply really quick punisher to make that the dog will understand consistently happens when they go on these countertops or go in the garbage can or go this place that they're not supposed to be, to quickly allow the dog to be free with that owner quicker, and enjoy the relationship, versus all kinds of drawn out crazy stuff which scientifically doesn't even make sense, to teach the dog to stop doing something, only to train the dog alternative things. You could train all the alternative things you want, but you're being negligent if you tell the owner, I'm not going to come and teach you how to stop that behavior in the way that scientifically works best. I'm only going to show you alternative behaviors that we're going to hope the dog does. And we're going to do a lot of troubleshooting. We're going to do all these other things, and you're going to spend a lot more money. Okay? Not saying that's the go-to thing, that necessarily we're using punishment right away for all cases, all right? A lot of things could be managed first and stuff like that. But LIMA allows you to have flexibility based off of those guidelines, that you have the dog and the owner's best interest in mind, and that you are humane. that you are a humane person, that you're not going to be abusive, you're not going to be haphazard. So with this is a lot of these going off track is based off of somehow this gets put on the same page. Now, in Susan Friedman's defense, is I found a really nice article from her over here that I think everyone should read that shows that she is thoughtful. I believe like this whole thing, she had the best interest. It was put about with best interest because this is, for humans generally, this is what you do. But with dogs, we're talking, here we're talking about maybe a kid in a special needs class, right? But this isn't necessarily going to make sense if we're talking about a violent person, all right? Or someone who's breaking the law, causing injury, right? Like, is it so bad to give someone a ticket for driving recklessly? To add something, positive punishment is to add to discourage a behavior, okay? Is it so bad to add something that discourages behavior to someone who drives recklessly, along with adding positive reinforcement, like lowering down their insurance cost if they have a good driving record, right? Like this thing is not really science, all right? It's kind of recommendations. It's recommendations for mostly lower level issues, which I would agree with a lower level issue, but unrealistic for anyone who's actually out there helping people, who's making people, who's helping people out. So now, LIMA, how it helps us, all right? How it helps. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything because I kind of just go off here, and I want to deliver everything I promised for you guys in this lecture. All right. So yeah, LIMA is not a lot of stuff you see on these organizations. It definitely, I would say, if we go by our definitions of what is ethical in business, if we believe being competent is ethical, doing business, if we believe in being honest is ethical, a lot of organizations are not being ethical to their members who are relying on them. You can't get upset with people that are ignorant, right? If someone goes to an organization to get information and they're spoon-fed the wrong information, they're not really at fault. But who's writing this stuff? Or the people who are writing, like that's where you have to really look at, all right? So we want to understand LIMA the right way, and it's going to help things out. So how is it going to make us a better trainer? Is plain and simple. This is a good thing about LIMA. If you understand that competency is critical for learning to train in dogs, and you're not just going to a couple seminars, or you're just not learning off of social media posts or reading a couple books, and you take, just like any other profession, you take the time to learn it. I would say to be a good trainer, it takes about a year of diving in deep to at least get at a level where you can feel LIMA, right? You can feel you have enough things where you can make decisions and be LIMA, right? And practice LIMA, but also, if we're being ethical, continue to improve to be more and more LIMA, right? Work with like-minded, ethical individuals. Be part of an organization that is ethical, that preaches real competence and is not just has other agendas because they're possibly trying to sell something, for example. You have to look at what we're learning, and will this trickle down to the end user, to the dog and the owner, right? Are the policies just helping someone who's selling something, right? Remember what we are here for. Now, this is the cool thing, is most people who own dogs, like they're not following these, like they're not looking at these hierarchies. Is if you're working with someone, most likely, yes, they love their dog. And if you go in there And as a base, you let them know, I am here to make you and your dog's life better. And all of my decisions are based off of making this the of getting you the results you need with the least amount of stress possible to you and your dog. And if I if I think there may be another way, I'll be honest, I'll go look, right? I'll go learn it. But I'm not going to leave a stone unturned for you and your dog. You will get more clients and they will stay with you. They will enjoy training with you. And you're not going to be held back by self-righteousness where you cannot give them results because you're supposed to go consult with 2 or 3 other trainers before you decide to use a training tool that you know how to use humanely. The proof is in the pudding. The dog is happy. You understand body language. You know how to make that training. The training session is not revolved around the collar. You're still doing all of the other positive reinforcements and adding the good things and putting in just enough pepper or just enough breaks to put the dog back on track, right? So when we talk about aversives, they're meant to use as corrections, meaning to make right. We usually use them to draw the dog back to the behavior that we want, not just to suppress, right? That's the dead dog rule that Steven Lindsay was talking about. Not just to end behaviors. You're not being LIMA if that's what you're doing, all right? So it's all there. It's all in LIMA. It's all there for you. What else we got here? Okay, so yeah, this is going to make you follow LIMA, trust me, it's going to make you successful, be incompetent. By not being LIMA, these organizations following these weird, humane hierarchy that's not designed for training difficult dogs. What it does, it opens the doors for what I would call for hacks, we would call them, is since there's not a lot of places to really learn how to properly train and not getting support from these organizations, you get a lot of these trainers that'll go to like join franchises where they learn for like 2 or 3 weeks how to just use the e-collar, or do other things really quick. And then they go in and they're only understand how to say use an e-collar, and not much else. They haven't studied the dog behavior. They haven't studied all these other things. And then what do? They train with the animals more aversives than necessary, with literally like 99.99% more aversives than you would need if you were completely competent. And then what does it do? It gets tools banned. It shows misuse. It shows overuse. It happens all over. And this hurts the industry. So by organizations not adhering to LIMA and deciding that they're happy with trainers not being competent, their own trainers not being competent, and then open the doors for other uncompetent trainers, because if they dare try to use those techniques in a bigger organization, they're going to get kicked out. They're going to lose their dues. It's going to be a big problem. It's causing part of the bigger problem. It causes more abuse in the dog training industry. It makes it harder for people to find competent trainers because someone who is well versed and is LIMA is not going to be recommended by some of these organizations. And it does indeed cause trainers to have to lie to the organizations that they're members of and break their own code of conduct there. All right. Does not protect the consumer by putting trainers out there that are not competent at all. So in closing, let's see where we're at so we don't go too long. In closing, LIMA is a measure of competence that we should all strive for. All right. From the very start of your dog training education or anywhere you are in your journey, always understand what LIMA is and understand what the heart of it is about. All right. It's going to be a guideline. It's just a guideline based off of ethical training mostly, and making decisions that are going to improve the life of the dog and the owner together. But you have to be ethical. You have to be competent. You can't stop learning. All right. I'll stick around for a little bit for any questions about this lecture. And I will be back on Wednesday night with further questions. Let's see what we got. See if we have anything. I know there's a delay. Yeah, I see there's definitely questions about Steven Lindsay's books. I would love to get in contact with him to see, because considering there's trainers from all over around the world and different parts of the country, and it is his volumes are expensive. They are expensive. I have them on I think Google Books, is it called? The Google, where you download the books and like the Google store. And I love it because I could use them as references right from my phone or from a computer. I could search terms. That's what I did for this lecture, actually. I was just able to look up LIMA, any place where they mention LIMA. I could go through all the volumes and I could find it. That's why I like the digital books that you can buy. That you could buy. I got it off of Google Books. Okay, so I think we're going to be good. I'm going to close this stream off over here. You can. I know you have notes in the classroom. I'm always going to have a page, and I'll update what I have about LIMA at lima.dog. It goes in the knowledge base. Pretty much anywhere you go on the site, though, if you want to know about LIMA. Of course, this is going to be put in the formal course with questions. I'll talk about that more on Wednesday. But you can write LIMA here, and you'll come up with it. You can go right to the knowledge base and write LIMA over here, and it'll pop up. Or you can literally, in your browser, write lima.dog. I think it's really important, and that'll bring you right to what I have, notes I have about LIMA. All right, so thanks for coming, and I will be back on Wednesday.